My warmest wishes that I welcome you to the 2021 West African Annual Conference. The conference, which was first held in 2017, aims to bring entrepreneurship ecosystem actors together to discuss and develop solutions to the challenges facing entrepreneurs. Since the conference was first held, we've had a remarkable success with about 120 participants in the last in-person conference from more than 15 countries. We've had an equal number of participants registered for this year. I want to recognize that this version of the conference is novel in several different ways. First, this is the first virtual West African conference. We felt that it was essential to continue to have ecosystem dialogue, even during the ongoing global fight against COVID-19. I applaud all of you who are present to continue this dialogue with us, even as we face online fatigue and worse still, battling the effects of the virus on the ecosystems and within our personal lives where we work. Second, Andy is deepening our engagement in Francophone West Africa, where we are working to build out support for the ecosystem within that region. This conference is the first year where we've had a dedicated component for our French-speaking colleagues, which happened this morning. Throughout the morning session, we discussed issues facing the region, including the financing gaps within the region, how to better instill gender lens investing, best practices on preparing entrepreneurs for investment, and how best ESOs can support the development and growth of entrepreneurship ecosystems. It is with this in mind, historically, much of our work and the rest of the sector is centered on more established ecosystems. Andy is exploring ways to best support ecosystem development, particularly in ecosystems that are less developed and have received less of a spotlight and the respective attention. We are working with the goal that we want all SGB entrepreneurs to have access to the right types of resources that they need to thrive, even locations that have not yet received the attention needed. We are also working intentionally with ecosystem players like yourselves to address three key issues: climate and environmental action, gender, and decent jobs. Through climate and environmental action, we are working in ways so that enterprises can address climate change by promoting business models which encourage a reduction in climate change drivers, or ways to adapt to climate change impacts. Entrepreneurs can advance mitigation or adaptation solutions through inventing, developing, and deploying new technologies or driving local adoption of existing solutions. To achieve this, entrepreneurship support organizations and other ecosystem players need to prioritize climate action, understand key climate priorities, local community adaptation needs, methodologies on how SGBs can support adaptation, and how to address climatic risk. The needed architecture is still not there to support low carbon development and rapid climate action in key developing economies within the SGB sector. Within gender, our work seeks to build supportive entrepreneurship ecosystems that are responsive to ways in which women have been subject to gender bias and institutional exclusion. We are working to strengthen ESOs that provide support to women entrepreneurs to fund more companies, build their capacity, connect with the appropriate sources of capital, and to help them scale. With decent jobs, SGBs create most jobs in economy. Andy is working to identify ways to ensure that quality jobs are created through the sector within the respective economies where we work. We are still ideating on how we can best be responsive to this and how we can promote decent job growth through the SGB sector. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with ecosystem players like yourselves. There are a couple of organizational announcements that I would like to make. As you may now know, I am the managing director for Andy, where I work closely with the Andy West African team in building out their support for the ecosystem. I have been a longtime supporter of Andy, being both a member for the last 5 years, as well as serving on the Andy Regional Steering Committee in East Africa. I have worked throughout developing economies to strengthen ecosystems for entrepreneurs. I would also like to make a couple additional announcements. I would like to thank Olatunji, if he's on the call, for the many years he has led the West African chapter. With his movement to programmatic work within the organization, we have been able to elevate Joshua to lead the chapter. He has worked alongside Olatunji for many years, and and as of the beginning of July, he has taken the reins of the chapter. Last, but most definitely not least, without the support from our members, the attendees, and more specifically for the sponsors of the ANDI West African Annual Conference, this event would not be able to occur. I want to extend gratitude to both SAIB and Creative Métier for sponsoring this important event. I would also like to thank Joshua and the rest of his team for producing the conference. Welcome again to the ANDI West African Annual Conference, and I hope that you enjoy the conference and are able to learn a lot from the continuing conversation.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Thank you very much for the opening remarks. And I see that all our discussants are here. I'm excited to get the conversation started. I am now going to hand over to Femi Taiwo. He's the Executive Director of Leap Africa, and he'll be the one moderating the panel session. Thank you for your presence, Femi, and I'm going to hand over to you right now.
Thank you so much, Ajoke. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. And very good message, Kyle. I've been privileged to see the hard work that Tunji and Joshua have been putting in, along with the other team members. So good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Femi Taiwo. I lead the team at Leap Africa. Leap Africa is a youth-focused leadership development organization based in Nigeria. And I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to moderate this panel focused on leveraging digital transformation to improve business development service delivery. And I'm not alone. I have three interesting and very power-packed ladies that's going to be leading these conversations. My job is just to get the best out of them. I have Raliat, Ineka, and Jane. I won't attempt to introduce them. I'm going to give them the floor in a second. But just before we jump in, the reason why we're having this panel, basically, last year was a very, very unique year. And last year spilled into this year. I just came back from a trip and I branched my office to pick up a document and realized one of my colleagues just tested positive for COVID-19. I mean, we're meant to take a trip together tomorrow. And so we had to take the mandatory test. So the disruption is still very much real in the environment and around the whole world. And in the midst of it, ANDI did a survey of its members to understand how the COVID-19 crisis impacted their work. And one of the things they found from the business development service providers, particularly those based in emerging markets, was that quite a number faced severe liquidity crisis and program stoppages, and thus needed support to survive and adapt by introducing new COVID-19 related programming and finding a way to take digital more seriously. So this panel is focused on sharing insights on digital transformation. So we have Raliat, Ineka, and Jane. They will share a bit about their journey as an organization and even what they've seen and observed in the organizations they support. So they're going to share a bit about digital strategies and technologies that can be employed and to provide services for small growing businesses. And for those of you that are SGBs here, some tips that will be useful for you to champion your own digital transformation journey. So without further ado, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. So Raliat, first 2 minutes for you. Could you just go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce your organization and tell us a bit about what happened during COVID-19 to you guys? So first 2-3 minutes, then I hand over to Ineka, then to Jane, then we get started. So over to you, Raliat.
Great, thank you, Femi, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and excited to be discussing, I think, really topical issues today. I'm Raliat Simonu. I lead Accion's advisory engagement across the Middle East and Africa. And Accion is a nonprofit. We've been around for over 60 years now, and we've been really working with underserved customer segments. So working with small and micro businesses, working with low income customers, and the service providers who serve them. And we do this in various ways, through investments. We do this through advisory and technical assistance services, which is the team that I'm a part of. And we also work with a broader set of players through our Center for Financial Inclusion to make sure that as an entire industry, we're focusing on and addressing the topical issues that affect service providers and these customer segments that I mentioned. I think you're right. I mean, last year and certainly continuing to this year has been, an interesting one. I think a couple of things that we're learning and that we're seeing. So in the last few years, even before COVID, Axion and the advisory team, we've been working with our service providers to really help them do two things. One is take better advantage of digital technologies and tools internally to be more efficient, to grow more quickly and more efficiently, but also to then use those capabilities that they're building to support their own customers who are micro businesses, who are low income customers, to help them take better advantage of the digital economy. What COVID-19 and last year has done is really accelerated that work, and I think really shown how much more urgent that work is. It's no longer a nice to have, it is a question of survival, and that organizations all over are saying they need to do this, not just from a tools perspective, but the internal organization itself, the staff that you have, the customers that you serve, the partners that you work with, everyone has to be thinking along the same lines in terms of how to take better advantage of digital transformation. As service providers ourselves, I think we have also learned how to provide even more support, but doing this in a different way. Typically, we would be on site working with our partners alongside them within their organizations. Of course, that hasn't happened in the last year. So we've also had to internally figure out how to support the partners we have all around the continent, do that remotely, and create new tools and create new services to provide that support remotely, but without stinting on the quality, and ensuring that at the end of the day, we're helping the partners and the customers that they serve to get to where they want to be a lot quicker, and that we're giving them and helping them build the capabilities that they need to be more resilient to. I mean, COVID is just the latest. There's not to sound dire, but there's plenty more, I think, in the future. But the question is, how do we help our customers and the partners that we serve become more resilient and to thrive, not just survive, but thrive in the face of crisis such as what we saw last year. So that's, as a summary, the things that we've faced and that we've been doing with our partners.
Thank you so much, Ralia. Very, very interesting thoughts. Ineka, over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Femi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever we are. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. My name is Nneka Okeka, and I head the gender desk at the Enterprise Women Center of the Pan-Atlantic University. We're almost 2 decades old, and primarily what we've been doing is working with entrepreneurs. So to date, we probably have about maybe 1 million plus within our ecosystem. And we started off as a training institution, but we've done a lot of support services for the entrepreneurs. Now, what we saw with COVID was really very interesting. And I think that the topic that we're discussing today is really very important. A lot of the entrepreneurs that we serve, so our entrepreneurs are across various sectors, various life cycles. So we have entrepreneurs doing anything from $10,000 turnover all the way to $10 million turnover. And what we saw was that they all took a hit. The small, the medium, the big, they took major hits. So what we have been preaching, the main focus of what we do with entrepreneurs really is trying to help them clarify their processes, clarify their systems. And for those who had struggled with going digital, for those that had struggled and wanted to continue the old way, COVID didn't allow them that luxury. They had no choice but to quickly just jump on board and start to make changes. But something that we found out that cut across all the entrepreneurs that we had that we're working with was the fact that there was a softer issue to it, and a lot of them needed counseling. And what we've seen now is that, yes, we're talking digital, we're talking a lot of things, but with COVID, with any other disaster that comes, the first thing that takes a hit is your culture. And for a lot of them, they realized that they didn't have much. For a lot of the entrepreneurs, they realized that they had glorified hobbies. So beyond the mentoring, the coaching, beyond the process improvement, one thing that we saw that COVID did was the fact that for a lot of them, they had no culture. For a lot of them, there were major skills gap. So yes, you bring the tech, but the people that you bring the digital transformation, but your people, it's a misfit. And we've done a couple of research and we're still doing surveys. But what we have seen is that when we talk digital transformation, the fear that most entrepreneurs face is the fact that it looks like rocket science. It's not rocket science. It's just a way of making sure that you're able to maximize your user experience, your customer experience, being seamless and being extremely efficient and effective. I'm looking forward to the conversation because like Riale just said, this is just the beginning. We had Ebola, we had COVID, there are other things in the pipeline, and whether we like it or not as players in that space, we do need to help our entrepreneurs to be ready and prepared.
Thank you so much, Nneka. Thank you so much for that introductory conversation. Jane, over to you.
Thanks, Femi. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Andy and the team. And it's a pleasure to be here and also joined by fellow panelists. My name is Jane Delcer, and I'm the Program Director of the Catalyst Fund Inclusive Digital Commerce Accelerator. The program is operated by BFA Global, which is our firm, and BFA is a consulting firm. We're focused on improving the resilience and well-being of underserved people globally. And we do this by applying financial and digital innovation, venture building with the tech startups we work with, impact investing, and also bringing it together with field research, practical implementation, and a global network of partners in order to build solutions with our partners and our clients. And so a program like Catalyst Fund is one of our flagship programs, which in and of itself is an accelerator for inclusive tech innovation in emerging markets. So what we do as an accelerator is we support impact companies that offer accessible, affordable, and appropriate solutions that are designed for underserved individuals, for MSCs, and we help them accelerate their innovation as well as the ecosystems around them. So the IDC program has a sectoral focus in bringing digital commerce to underserved populations such that they can benefit from digital commerce through improved livelihoods and hopefully through the livelihoods, improved resilience. So this program in particular works with, by the end of the program, we'll have worked with 6 digital commerce companies, and we're focused in Ghana. So currently we're in the halfway point of the program and we're looking for our next 4 companies to work with. And so in this discussion today, we bring the lens of working with more of the tech startups and how we have brought digital transformation into our work with them, right? Which has originally been pre-COVID was very much in person, very much on site, and adjusting to that, and the processes and the methodologies that guide that. But I think it's also interesting that our perspective is one of an organization that was already somewhat digital and kind of remote in nature, and coping with that through COVID. So yeah, I look forward to the discussion, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you so much. So before we take a deep dive, we don't want this to be a one-way street, so we want a dialogue, and I would really like you all to participate actively in the comment section. Some of the thoughts that we had going into this, what are the common thoughts in your head? You hear things like digital transformation is expensive, it's time-consuming, it's complex. You hear people say things like digital transformation is just focused on my customer-facing roles or my internal company processes. I want to hear your own experiences in the comment box. What are some of the pain points you experienced in the last 1 year, or overall in your digital transformation experience? What are some of your big questions, your big frustrations, your big success stories? Please just do well to comment and put it in the comment section. I'm going to make sure I pull out some of those thoughts and throw it out. And also, if you have questions that come up as the conversations go on, please do well to just write the questions. We'll come to it very shortly. Now, let me start by just throwing out a definition. I know typically for almost everything, you find all manner of perspectives and all manner of definitions. So we're talking about digital transformation. What does that mean? I like a definition by Salesforce. I mean, most of you know Salesforce, the CRM sales tool. I like the perspective. I'm going to read out very, very quickly what they think digital transformation is all about. And Raliat, I'm going to come over to you to ask a question. So Salesforce thinks that digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies to create new or modifying existing business processes, culture, and customer experiences to meet changing business and market requirements. So they feel that it's reimagining a business in the digital age. So Raliat, quickly to you, what would you say, with all the infrastructure gaps we have in the region? We know that data cost is quite high on the continent, compared to other continents. We know that data penetration, even though it has increased, mobile penetration is still not as huge as some other parts of the world. With all the infrastructure gaps that we have, how can organizations really leverage digital transformation in optimizing their businesses? Yeah.
Thanks. That's a good question. Before I dive into how, maybe it's worth it to say how we look at data transformation, because then that sort of leads to the answer to how to manage the infrastructure gaps. I think one of the things we do with data transformation is, what is it? And I like the definition that you've given, but what are the components of it? And you mentioned, I think, 5 or 6 things that's really critical. Partnerships. It's also about the culture, so the people within the organization and their attitude and change in mindset. It's about the technology, so the tools and the processes and the products that you offer to the customers that you serve. So when you look at it from all of those angles, you will see that the infrastructure and as you mentioned, data cost, unreliable, data services to a large extent, that affects maybe 2 or 3 out of those components. I do think that, primarily one of the most fundamental things is to say the service or the way that I'm reimagining how I serve my customers. How do these different components play? The people, the culture, the technology, processes, platforms, etc. And you will find that the most successful attempts or approaches to data transformation have been where you have a great understanding of the context in which you operate and the customers that you're serving. I'll give you a very specific example with one of our partners here in Nigeria, where did a lot of work to reimagine how they provide credit, right, loans to small businesses and micro businesses. And trying to do this end to end in a digital way, even remotely, saying that you will apply for the loan, you will get, analyzed for the loan, and the loan will get disbursed all digitally. Now, when you think about the kinds of customers that we're talking about, who to a large extent may not be digitally savvy, may not be used to using, smartphones or even have access to smartphones, or be in areas where the data or the connectivity doesn't work well. What the institution then had to do was say, all right, there is an ideal scenario where everything is end-to-end digital. And that addresses, the need to be quick, to serve the customer better. But we also have less than ideal scenarios with customers who don't have the infrastructure, don't have the access to the tools. So we will create a mix of channels. So you can use your smartphone, you can use a feature phone using USSD to apply. When you initiate a request through USSD, then it goes to a call center, and the call center then calls you and says, oh, we noticed that you expressed an interest in applying for a loan. and then they walk you through and they understand, are you one of those who are best served by the ideal scenario, or are you one of those who require a little bit more help? And depending on where you fall, then you're either channeled through a branch or some other channel, or you go through the ideal scenario, which is all fully digital. And I think, in doing that, it addresses the different kinds of customers, the different challenges that the customers will have. Some who can do, fully self-service, and some who need a bit more hand-holding. And so the way to address those challenges is, as I mentioned, looking at all the 5-6 components for digital transformation, saying, if I'm going to who are my customers, and what are the challenges they're likely to have? What are the connectivity challenges or platform challenges, etc., that they have? And how do I serve the different types of customers, and making sure that internally my people, my processes, my platforms are geared to serve these different segments with the different channels and issues that they might have.
Apologies, I was muted. Very interesting thoughts, Valiant. I took a lot out of that. You described the various components to think about when we are thinking about digital transformation. It's not just about the tools or the technology, but also the culture, the mentality, the people, the processes, the platform. I like what you said about how digital transformation is contextual. It's contextual to where your business is situated, who you're trying to serve. And I think one key summary is reimagining our service and our product delivery from a digital lens, starting from where we are and who we're trying to reach. So I'm going to come to you, Nneka. One thing
I'd like to add a response to our definition of digital transformation.
Oh yeah, go ahead, please, Jane. Go ahead. Yeah.
And adding to the interactivity of it all is, I think we all aspire for digital transformation. But I also take the cue from what's top of mind for everyone, in addition to crises like COVID, is the climate change issue we have right now, right? And we talk about like climate resilience or climate transformation, and I think it's a big word or a big weight that we put on ourselves, when the reality on the ground, I think, is about adaptation, right? Also in the climate context, is that we try to replicate existing processes in a digital way, and it reflects the reality on the ground, right? Like transformation, I think, also kind of implies a lot of actors that don't necessarily coordinate, or aspirations that are actually now hard to achieve. And so I do think like being able to distinguish between digital adaptation, which is the reality that we operate in, and digital transformation, which is where we aspire to be and operate under constraints, is an important distinction to make, because when you're dealing with emerging market context, and you're dealing with, I think some of the panelists have mentioned here, limited connectivity or limited digital literacy, those are all aspirational, but our ability to adapt and to actually implement that, therefore, looks very different. So I just wanted to highlight that in terms of when we talk about transformation, what we seek and we hope to achieve, but balance with the kind of reality and the constraints we work with.
I really like that thought and perspective, Jane. For me, one of the things we believe in Leap Africa, that it's transformation is first mentality before ability. So I like the lens that you bring, that it's first of all how we see the lens we see from in the context and within the context and the constraints that we face. And one key thing that came out of that for me is, transformation is not necessarily the destination, but even the journey. So I see a question here, and it kind of leads to the question I want to ask you, Nneka. I see Ibade said something, that one of the pain points they have as an organization is, how do they strike a good balance between going fully digital versus hybrid? Especially because they found out that, and we found that too in our organization, the high level of digital literacy kind of impacts on some of the things you can do, and how you can, just as you are trying to go on a journey as an organization, the people you're trying to serve, your beneficiaries, your customers too, are on their own journey. So for you, Nneka, what would you say for organizations like this, for small and growing businesses or organizations that are serving them? How do we prioritize our digital transformation needs in the short term while also keeping a long-term view and horizon. So just like I said, it's a process. It's not necessarily just a destination, it's the journey. So what would you advise an organization in the immediate term, in the midterm, and the long term to think, how should they think about digital transformation?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Femi, for that. And I think the first thing would be the realization that all the small growing businesses, each one is going on a separate individual and personal journey. And when we realize that we're all on our separate journeys, it means that we'll approach our digital transformation differently. Now, the first thing is that what we see with digital transformation, and you just said that now, Femi, it starts with the mind. And for a lot of small growing businesses, the main challenge and why they were conflicted was the fact that a lot of them did not have a vision. Your digital transformation strategy should fall in line with the overall vision of the organization. So for most small businesses who didn't have a vision, who were just running haphazardly, they faced a major challenge. However, for some of the businesses, so I'm going to use case studies from what we've done with entrepreneurs within our network. So like I said earlier on, we have over 1 million across different strata. So for a lot of them, the first thing was actually identifying what position they were currently. So I'll use an example of a school. So there's a school in Abuja, and they were having their first term, and then we had COVID and everybody shut down. So we know a lot of schools said, oh, we moved immediately to Google Classroom. They were sending assignments to parents. Children already had tablets. But the challenge that school had is that they now found out that 45% of their staff, their teachers, were not as IT literate as a lot of the children. So in as much as some of the children or most of the children had the platforms to continue their classes, the teachers, so it's not you moving from the classroom to online, a lot of things need to change. So it's back to the mindset, just even understanding, having a conversation prior to that time. So for a lot of entrepreneurs, the first thing we do is we tell them to just take stock. Exactly where are you right now? So for that particular school, what had to happen was that they had to, those that were really IT literate, those that didn't have challenges with light, with data, and I think I've seen some of those comments in the chat box. So we talk about digital transformation, but in our climate where we are in Nigeria, internet is a problem, light is a problem. So you might have internet, you might not have light. And if you're a school and you need to run for 1 year, what does that mean? What does that translate to? And that's where creativity comes in. So the first thing I would say to most small growing businesses is actually to just take stock. Where are we? For those that already have a vision and they have their strategic objectives for the year, is to start with those that are key. So definitely we need to have revenues. We need to have a lot of revenues coming in. For those of us that have shops and we didn't have an online platform, the easiest thing would be to say, okay, fine, can we move on to social media? Can we go onto social media? What does that mean? That means having to employ someone that will help us with that. But even if you're on social media, digital transformation is end-to-end. So if you look at your staff, that's the first thing. Do we have capable staff? We don't have capable staff. The first thing for you is to start to see what's the quickest and most efficient way to see about bringing in staff that immediately would help us achieve our short-term objectives. Okay, so for social media, it might not be a full-time staff. You could just bring in a consultant, an intern for 6 months, 1 year, and then you attach 2 of your existing sales and marketing team to work with that person to understand. So this is just an example. So even if we do have and we bring in a social media expert to help with that so that we can take our products online, the next thing is that we need to connect that to our operations. And that's what we saw happening last year. A lot of people just said, oh, I've taken all my stores, I've shut it down, I've gone online. But they were not prepared internally. For digital transformation, we now have to look at our whole operations. For as many people that are ordering, do we have it in stock? Even if we have it in stock, what's the delivery? what's the delivery system. So what I would say to small grain businesses that are thinking about their digital transformation needs in the short term is to think about the most important thing. And for a lot of them, it was cash. They needed cash flow. And for as long as cash is not coming in, a lot of them were strangulated. We saw, I think, out of the businesses that we surveyed, almost 20% of them almost went under, short of accessing grants from the central bank. So the COVID loans that central bank gave, quite a number of them, a lot of them would have gone under because they just didn't have revenues, they didn't have cash flow coming in. I would say, let's look at everything. We look at our staffing, we look at our cash flow. What is making us not sell? Is it the people? Is it the process? Is it the platform? Or is it a lack of inventory? By the time we've done that, and then we will now have a long-term view to say, what are the things that we need to do that will be a bit more permanent? And that would go back to those 4 things that I've talked about: the people, the platform. So now, most times they recruit haphazardly. They haven't taken the skills into consideration. They haven't done a lot of culturalization. So in going forward, those are some of the things that they'll now need to be looking at. So the organogram that we have, what kind of skill sets should that general manager have? The supervisor, what kind of skill sets should they have? And then the next thing we're looking at, if we're working remotely, because a lot of them have decided, okay, you know what, we want to work remotely. What does that look like? The people that we're recruiting, what do we need to do to provide them the right environment so they can work remotely without distorting our process? So the question now should it be, even if we're going to go hybrid as an organization, what does that look like? How many days a week do they come? Are we going to have flexi working hours? And then even the concept that we birthed last year for talent pool. Should we have permanent staff? Should we have a hybrid pool where we can all plug in and then get talent based on per hour? That's what some of the schools are considering. Why do I need to hire full-time certain subject matter experts in schools when I only need them for a couple of days a month? So those are some of the things and some of the conversations that need to take place if you're looking at your digital transformation in the short term, in the midterm, and the long term.
Thank you so much, Nneka. I love simplicity, and I like the way you just simplified it for small and growing businesses. Do a very simple gap analysis. Where are you right now? Where do you want to be? And prioritize on that journey. And I like one key message that came out of that is that digital transformation is an enabler of your goals and your aspiration. So the first thing is, what are you trying to achieve? What are your strategic goals, your tactical goals, and operational goals? And how can digital, using that lens to say, what can you do? What should you do? Jane, closely related to that, in your role with the Catalyst Fund for Inclusive Digital Commerce, what would you say, how useful is data in deciding or navigating your digital transformation journey? So how useful is data generally? Could you just share a bit on those reflections?
Sure, absolutely. So from the lens through the work we do as an accelerator program, we offer the companies that we work with, and through digital innovation, we provide bespoke venture acceleration, meaning we work very closely with the teams. We essentially become part of their teams in order to address particular skills gaps or help them achieve the kind of acceleration or closing the gap of skills that they may not have had otherwise. So this applies to software development, to design, to customer research, to business modeling. And so that's one of the things we do with the companies very closely, is just providing this kind of tailored technical assistance to the companies directly, in addition to the kind of grant capital we offer through the program, as well as connections to the ecosystem through investors and corporate partners, and then a set of learnings that come from the work with the companies as a form of insights and demonstration for what we're doing. And So I think that work informs a lot about how we think about data. We do what we run sprints, right? With the companies we work with, we organize it as a sprint cycle in order to kind of scope the work in a very clear way, right? So what Nneka was talking about in terms of vision, it's about setting this objective of what we want to achieve with the companies while we work with them. And through those sprints, they're scoped very clearly. One of the first things we do with them is this data deep dive. About taking stock of what the company has in terms of data and what they know, right? Is what's the evidence for your approach or your design or selection of features around the product or innovation you have? Or what's the evidence that you are at serving a need and that's something that's valued by the customers you're serving? So it's very much about trying to help the companies through data, through capturing and mapping out data along a user journey. That user journey is that we use along kind of growing your customer base. That user journey is called the Pirate Metrics, right? It's called Pirate Metrics because it's AARR like R. So that's acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral, right? So it's this kind of progression. And I think that same journey can apply to the SGBs we're talking about here today, right? Around organizations and thinking through their own digital transformation, which is what is your digital transformation journey going to look like? And what is that funnel, right? From the processes or the kind of where you are to the next stage that you want to get along that user journey, right? What's the adaptation? What's the activation or the usage? What's the kind of success metric? What's the retention or the adoption of the approach? And so I think you can think of like capturing data along that journey, and by capturing that data, understanding what are the pain points along that journey for the organization, what are the challenges that you need to deal with, and what are the opportunities at those points in that journey that therefore you as an organization, because you're measuring, you're able to say, well, an appropriate solution or a solution that's based in how our organization is designed and what we seek to do, what would be appropriate as a digital intervention. So I do think that, whether we're working with startups or whether we're thinking about our own organizational design and our journey in digital transformation, that you need to have that data. You need to be able to measure that data in order to be able to say, where's the intervention and what's the traction, what's the progression towards that goal. And I think that the data also sets you up for having that North Star, right? Where we talked about this vision or what is the organization as a whole trying to achieve, whether it be a revenue target, whether it be a certain number of customers that we're trying to reach, or whether it's a certain kind of digital ability that we're trying to reach as an organization. Having that kind of data mindset and evidence-based process is going to allow you to achieve that.
Thank you so much. So having the data is king. Data is useful on any transformational journey. Ralia, do you want to reflect on that too? What's your experience with data and how important it is in navigating digital transformation?
No, I think that there is no digitally enabled transformation without data. So that being said, I think where, as Jane has mentioned, where organizations, whether it's small and growing businesses or even the more established businesses, where they suffer is how to use the data that they've got. I think when you look at organizations that have been around, especially for years and years, there's so much data that they've collected. How clean is this data is a different story. So if you go to Department A, they will tell you one view, and Department B will have another view, all using the same data. So I think a lot of the things that we focus on in helping organizations use data more effectively is to say, what is the data that you have, and how useful is it? When I say useful, how clean is it? How close is it to helping you get the insights that you need to have? So it's the how of the data. That's part of your data strategy. The second part is, do you even have the tools and the people to help you transform that raw data into something that makes sense, into something that is intelligence to help you drive and manage your business and understand what your customers are telling you. that's another different story. I think especially for younger organizations, I think the talent is where they struggle. And certainly acquiring some of the data analytics tools and platforms is another area where they struggle. I think the third part is then, and Jane alluded to this as well, around the data strategist, then saying, okay, I have this data, I understand, how to use it, I have the tools and I have the people, but what is it that I'm using it to do? So, and by that, I mean, in order to really effectively use data, it needs to address different parts of the organization. So it's not just, you have a data scientist or you have a data team that's using data. No, it has to be that you're using data and the information that you're getting out of that data to drive, product development. Where are the gaps in the products that you have, and in how you serve your people? The customers that you interact with, where are some of their challenges, and is there a different way that you can do that? Data has to help you address that. The kinds of processes within the organization that you have, how are you constantly improving them? That's data. And even thinking through, how do you grow your business? Do you go to which markets, new markets do you go into, etc.? It's data and the insights that you bring that's helping you do that. And last but not the least, I think there has to be the realization that no matter how good your data is and the tools and the people, etc., that you really need to then leverage external partners in order to have a more complete view of your ecosystem. And that's also another area where I think many, especially younger businesses, where they struggle to identify the right kinds of partners that can help them create the data sets and the information and insights that they need.
All right. Thank you so much, Ralia.
Sorry, can I just say something? No, just with what Ralia was saying. Another thing that we've seen with the small grain business community is the fact that they have all that data, but a lot of them struggle with empowering their employees with the data, and they hold that to their chest, to the detriment of the organization. So in looking at digital transformation and data, one thing that is very important and very key is for the founders or the managers of the businesses to share that data and empower their employees with that data. And doing that, of course, would mean that they would start by encouraging collaboration and making sure that they realize that they're all in it together. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much, Ralia. Thank you so much. I like the thoughts here. I'm looking at the time. I'm going to be bringing this closely to an end very soon. But I want us to give people more in terms of tools. Let's give them some tools and some tips. I know that digital transformation, we've tried to simplify it, that yes, mentality, looking at your processes, looking at your services, your service delivery, your customer relationship management, looking at different parts of your business from a digital lens and asking yourself, what can we do better? And how can we move and navigate and improve the experiences internally and externally? What are some of the tools that you found really transformative for you guys in your organization? So that's a question to you all. What are some tools, some tips you found, that have been transformative for you as an organization or for the organizations you serve, that really changed the game in any area of digital transformation? We've talked a bit about talent is crucial in driving digital transformation. Are there some places people can look at? Maybe there are some consultants or some communities that provide maybe pro bono services or provide cheap services or cheaper services, or maybe not cheap is not the word, but affordable services, as it were. So, Jane, do you have some tips for the listeners and the participants on this call? Some tips, some tools that you think, check this out, check that out. You could as well even type in, and that question is to everyone. You could type anything into the chat box that you think would be useful for the ecosystem and the community. Jen, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think just in terms of organizational tools and that come to how we work in a remote context or virtually, the usual suspects are there, right? We use Zoom as an organization. We rely heavily on Zoom, email, but each of those tools have a specific usage. So for example, we don't have meetings unless there's a clear agenda, right? That gets relegated to email. Email is much more transactional, but then we have Slack that allows us to manage information more in real time and kind of immediate consults, but also to create water cooler movements through channels that are more informal. So I think it's important that if you have a suite of digital tools, that the usage and the expectations around that usage are clearly delineated, because you could be inundated by a lot of tools and you bring everything to a meeting in Zoom, and we're all facing this kind of Zoom fatigue. I think tools like Miroboard have been really great for helping us to do brainstorm in remote situations and as a group to help us to workshop. So that's also, I think, a great tool to leverage for organizations. And I think this is not digital, but in terms of a tool, we've also been doing a lot of scenario building, right? Whether we're building it into financial models or we're building it into our thinking, our brainstorming, our own proposals, an element where you can think about scenarios and you can think about those contexts. Therefore, what's your response? What's your vision for future scenarios? What's your preparation? I think that's also a really helpful tool. Specifically as a program, since we focus on acceleration and trying to spur the ecosystem of innovation for digital and financial inclusion towards resilience, that we have a due diligence series that I would refer the network to. If you are working, if the SGBs as companies are also working with other companies and trying to assess their competence or their ability. So we do have one post on about tech due diligence, how to do that, like rapid tech due diligence, and also a remote due diligence guide for primarily for investors, but I think it could be used in the context of how you might do remote due diligence as a different stakeholder. So those are what I would recommend.
Thank you so much. I mean, when you were speaking, I just realized actually the quite a number of things to that were very useful for us last year, or in the last 3 years, I must say. If you're registered as a non-profit or a social enterprise, there are quite a number of resources you can access for free or at a significantly reduced cost. So I remember 3 years ago, one of the things we wanted to do in Leap Africa was digitize our back office operations, significantly. And we quite a number of the products out there, Oracle and the likes, enterprise resource planning tools are quite expensive. But we found that Oracle bought NetSuite, and Oracle NetSuite had a social impact grant, and they were willing to give the cloud-based enterprise resource planning tool at 80% of cost at that time. And so we started a journey of digitizing our back office operation, our HR, procurement, everything ERP, basically finance, everything cloud-based. We never knew COVID was going to happen, but that was very useful for us. So I would say check out Oracle NetSuite. One other place you can check, I'm going to type this out, is techsoup.org. For us, we obviously use a lot of the tools that you use, Zoom and the likes, and they can be quite expensive, but if you check out TechSoup, they have a deal with quite a number of technology enablers and providers, and they give it at free. They give it free or give it at a very, very reduced rate for social enterprises and non-profit organizations. And one rule of thumb, one thing that we found very useful in Leap Africa is that we reach out to any organization we want to use their tool and tell them, this is the exciting work that we do. Can you give us for free? And we got quite a number of unpublished free things, from Grammarly, as simple as Grammarly is, to Facebook ads, Google ads. So you should just look out and don't limit yourself because of cost. Don't limit yourself because of talent. We also have very good examples of getting quite a number of organizations support with talent. We had Canva seed out some of their staff to support us with some transformation. We've had Facebook do that. So I would just say don't limit yourself because of cost or because of talent in driving your digital transformation. Ineka, do you want to share a bit more? I see that you've been active in the chat box.
So beyond what I've put in the chat box, as regards talent, there are quite a number of multilateral agencies that can support you with talent. And I think the German GIZ is doing something like that now. So they were able to give you talent that are German trained and pay for it as well. So that's also something people can check out. In addition to what I've put in the chat box, I've put there Trello, the normal suspect. But something I want to talk about for those that are product-based, entrepreneurs are product-based, as it regards selling their products and joining platforms. Something that took off for a lot of them that they found very useful and it helped their sales was Telegram. So Telegram is something that, you know, a lot of us, we're always on WhatsApp and Facebook, but Telegram really has taken off a lot of them. And at EDC, we actually have a Telegram market access group, and they're selling every day on that platform. And it's free, it's easy, it's cheap. And because you're used to WhatsApp, so that's not a big deal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ineka. The reality is this. There are many things available to use, many free things, many ready to use things. It's first of all a mindset, and then applying that mindset. So you don't need big dollars to drive digital transformation at your level, depending on where you are to start the journey. At some point you might need to, but it doesn't limit you. So yeah, just as we round off, final thoughts from you. I'm going to start with you, Jane, then Ineka, then end with Raliat. Oh no, let me turn that around. I'm going to start with you, Ineka, then Jane, and then Raliat. Your final thoughts, your final punchlines.
I think my final thoughts when it concerns digital transformation for entrepreneurs, I always use this phrase, it's not rocket science. And the mere fact that we think about rocket science frightens a lot of them. So you need to look at your process, you need to look at your people, you need to look at your overall vision, where it is that you're going, and make sure that it's aligned. And lastly, it's all about the customers. So if what you're doing at the end of the day is not going to enhance your customer experience, you need to rethink it. And it's your journey. So it's personal to you. Don't be scared. Don't look at what SME A or B or C is doing. It's your journey. You wear the shoes. You know your customers. You know your terrain. So it has to make sense to you and to your ecosystem. And it's fine if it doesn't work out the first time. You figure it out.
All right. Thank you so much, Ineka. Jane, over to you.
Sure. That's great, Nick. I think that, you know, remembering that we're all people, right, that have to manage and use digital tools to be our best and productive is really key to the adoption of it. And so I think just going back to the beginning, that we have this phase of adaptation where we are replicating processes, we're taking offline to online, and we're taking analog to digital, and that needs to be done. That's the work that needs to be done, and we can be smart about how we do that adaptation. I think our long history of looking at digitization and realizing that wasn't the end, it was actually the means to the end, right? That what we're trying to do is create resilience or sustainability, and digitization or digital transformation is a means to that. Also means that when we think about the transformational aspect of digital, is that we are, need to be really user-centric about the approach. What's the reality that we operate in? What is the capability and the constraints that those users deal with? And therefore, what are the solutions that are centered on that user? So our employees, in terms of their appetite for and their ability and supporting that. And I think in really low digital environments, you do need to invest, right? It's a high touch investment where there's a learning curve and kind of an institutional drive for this to happen. So I think that's really important. And ultimately, going back to your point, Neka, about like the vision, right? What's this transformation setting us up for? I do think that not only for efficiency, but also for us to be resilient, right? In the nature of all this change, and the more information we have, the more data, the more evidence, the better we can make our decisions. And the better that we can operate, right, as organizations. So I think that thinking through how digital transformation drives the organizational resilience is also very aspirational and inspirational. So I would keep that as my last word takeaway.
Thank you so much, Jen. Really powerful. I like what you said about the user-centric, being user-centric in your digital transformation journey. Raliat, over to you.
Yeah, I think I echo many of the things that Jane and Ineka have said. As I mentioned at the beginning, I think digitization is the latest enabler, right, to transformation in a long list of other things. I mean, at the turn of the 19th century, it was mechanization. Now it's digitization. And there are many predictors, I think, of being successful in this journey, in this latest journey. But one of the most critical ones is really about the organization and the organization's culture. We've said it, and we continue to say it. And I think that's one of the biggest predictors of success. If you're able to be agile, if you're able to really help the staff and the employees within the organization to understand what digitization can do, what it means, and help them work through enabling that for themselves and for the customers that they serve, I think, you know, the organization will be successful. Also, the customers that you serve. You know, digitization is the enabler, not the journey. So it's what works best for the context in which you're in and what works best for the customers that you're trying to serve. And really thinking not just from the perspective of your product or your service, but thinking through how can I, through my product, through my service, help them take better advantage of all the things that, you know, the new economy has to offer. I think that has to be the Lone Star. And last but not the least, I do think it's important to appreciate that, yes, digitization is expensive and can be expensive, but many organizations don't build a business case around it. There is a business case to be made, and so I would also urge that as we go through this journey, that we're constantly thinking through what is the return, what is the benefit, both financial but also otherwise, right? And building a business case around that, because that's the only way that we can sustain, you know, the digitization journey, both for the institution and for the customers that the institution serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ralia. Thank you. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for all the comments and even the questions that came in the chat box. The reality is this, that COVID-19 was a wake-up call. The digitization journey had started years ago, and it's now much more rapid than ever. And we just have to find our place in that journey and in the whole transformation. And thank you so much. It's been a privilege. Thank you, Ineka. Thank you, Ralia. Thank you, Jane, also for your thoughts and for all the wonderful contributions. So I'm going to hand over to Ajoke quickly. Ajoke.
Thank you very much, Femi. And thank you everyone for such an enriching conversation around digital transformation. I mean, this has been an enriching experience for me. We're immensely grateful to our panelists, Femi Taiwo, Ralia Tumonu, Nneka Okekaru, Jane Delsa, for sharing their time with us. I mean, some of the key takeaways for me include digital transformation is successful when an organization understands the context in which they operate and the customers they serve. Then before you even commence your digital transformation, it's important to take stock of where you are as an organization, and your digital transformation strategy must align with your overall organization strategy. And another important point, data is very critical in helping to design the digital transformation strategy. These are just a few of some of the takeaways for me. And just as the session was ongoing, we did realize that it would be beneficial if, I mean, this is actually putting our speakers on the spot right now, but I'm hoping that our speakers have at least 10 minutes more to spend with us. I want to ask that we have a breakout session for the next 10 minutes where each of our panelists would be in one breakout room and have the opportunity to have a couple of minutes conversation with members that are in that room and perhaps answer questions or just even share experiences on where everybody is in their digital transformation journey. We'll do that for 10 minutes and then we'll come back into this main room where we have our digital service provider available to then share brief information about their product and services, and then we'll close. I know Jane says she has to jump off. That's fine. Thank you very much, Jane. We will still have our 3 breakout rooms if Nneka, Raliat, and Femi are in agreement. Thank you very much. So in about a minute, we'll break out into the rooms, and then we'll have 10 minutes there to just have this conversation before we come back into the main room. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you for staying till this time.
Yes,
I was just going to quickly ask that Raliat should finish responding to the question that was raised in our room.
I was just asking Audrey something.
I mean, maybe we can take the next 5 minutes to just wrap up the individual. I know usually the way these breakout rooms work, you're saying something and it just cuts you off. And so since we had 3 breakout rooms, I'll start with Raliat.
Yeah, sure.
And then she has just 1
Thank
minute to just respond to that answer, and then Nneka, and then the Femi's room too. Thank you.
Sure. Very quickly, the question was how to use technology to create a real virtual marketplace. And I'm saying that actually is not there are many marketplaces out there. I mean, if I think about retail marketplaces, you've got your e-commerce folks. If I think about supply chain or even agri marketplaces, there are many of those that exist. I think where the challenges are is that the users of these marketplaces, so whether the suppliers or the buyers, being able to have access to the tool and being able to use the tool effectively is where the challenge is. So what I would say is focus less on the technology bit, because I think that's easy, or just piggyback on something that already exists. But where you will find you can add a lot of value is in providing capacity building and training for the MSMEs who are going to use it, the customers, and doing a lot of user training, also building around the data that comes out of the platform to see where the challenges and where the opportunities to improve the customer's experience, whether they're on the buyer side or the seller side. Very quickly.
Okay, Nneka.
Okay, so in my group we had Audrey Ibrahim and Susan share, and what we saw from everybody was the fact that it was very easy for them to quickly pivot. So we looked at access to market, access to coaching services, access to counseling services, and the most used platform, of course, was Zoom. When we looked at access to market, the Floor platform was mentioned. So I mentioned that because that's one platform that we started using during the pandemic, and a lot of the entrepreneurs were able to exhibit. So it's an exhibition. We had various exhibitions and were able to sell. Susan shared how she was able to reach some of her clients, but that majority of those at the underserved segment could not because of access. So access to data, access to internet. But they did try, but they're very happy to go physical now. As for Ibrahim, a lot of the things that they did, they were able to take it online. And the beautiful thing about that was at no cost to the SGBs. So we wanted to know if we could access it. It's still in French. Hopefully, along the line, it will be made available to all for in English. But I think primarily, what came out was the fact that for us as players, one thing that's very important when we think about digital transformation is that it starts from us, it starts from the mind, and believing that it is possible, being very deliberate with what we're doing, making sure that it's aligned with our vision, and taking moments to pause and review, to reflect, to refine and retune our digital transformation. But by and large, it's doable, even for those that are in the philanthropy space. So Audrey also shared how they're able to use a particular platform to do all their audits and all their checks, all their application process. And it's doable.
Thank you, Nneka. Any last, Femi, do you have anything to say before?
Well, my group, the key thoughts were around diversity, equality, and inclusion, especially as we digitize our services. Josephine and Bernard shared, and we're strongly speaking around how in their experience last year, some of their beneficiaries were left behind because of the lack of digital literacy and, of course, the lack of inclusion. So just saying, as we're thinking about digitization, one key point is how are we on the continent carrying people along, and how are we participating as an ecosystem in bridging the digital literacy gaps and other digital inclusion gaps that exist right now on the continent. So that's it. And I think one other thing that came out of the group, Bernard shared about how digital basically enables the culture that we have and the practices that we have presently. And how digital is not necessarily a magic wand. So just saying, as we're talking about digital, we also still have to pay attention to our culture and our key processes and making sure they're high-performing processes and high-performing habits within the organization, even as you're thinking about digital transformation. Yeah, so those are the reflections now.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. I think we can just keep going on and on, but we have to be mindful of time. I have Segun from TDX Agency. He is a digital service provider, and we did say we would give room to digital service provider to just share brief information about their products and services. And I like that even before we got to this point, we already got that conversation started with people sharing tools and resources to help. Segun, please, if you're there, you have the floor for the next 3 minutes to just share brief information about your products and services. We can take a few questions before we round off.
All right, thanks, Ajoke. An exciting conversation here. Just to add to what everybody has said, in our experience, for digital transformation to be successful, it has to be driven top down, meaning leadership has to get involved at every point of the way, and also to use these tools at the end of the day. So my name is Segun from TDX Agency, headquartered in Lagos. For us as an agency, we are driven by helping organizations leverage, especially small businesses, leverage opportunities that exist within the digital ecosystem, especially as regards to marketing. Okay, so what we do is we basically help small businesses connect with customers online, find new customers online, and also help improve their business productivity. And we do that by providing, in terms of finding new customers, when it comes to online advertising, either on social media, on Google Ads, or either connecting with new customers with either a landing page or a website. And then if it's to improve business productivity, it will be, you probably want to set up your emails for better communication. You want to know how to use project management tools or any other tools that can help improve some of the things you do in-house. And I'll give a good example. Faith Foundation recently rebranded their online presence. So if you could check their website out, we help them do that and rebrand their online presence. And also they launched their podcast last year. We were able to also help them disseminate their podcast across the relevant platforms needed. We also created an online platform that houses all their podcasts. So that's an example of what we can help small businesses do. And like I said, we are small business friendly. And so we accommodate both small businesses and all the multinationals. We've worked with organizations like Google, Max.ag, Migo, and some startups in Lagos. We also have representations in the US and the UK just to help get more customers. All right, so that's that, Ajoke. That's what we do.
Thank you very much for that, Segun. Unfortunately, because of time, we may not be able to take questions, but if you can drop your contact details, how people can contact you. And then we do know that we have a matchmaking event coming up in Q4, and then you would have more opportunity to share your products. But please share your contact details in the chat box so that people can contact you after this time.
Most definitely. Thanks, Ajoke.
All right, thank you. And I really want to, this is to say thank you to everybody who has stayed on. Thank you very much to our panelists once again. I mean, we couldn't have even had this event if we did not have an audience. So I want to say a very big thank you to everyone who has been part of this event this evening. We have come to the end of the day one of the 2021 Andy West Africa Regional Conference. And on behalf of the Andy West Africa team, I want to reiterate our gratitude to everyone who has contributed to making this session a remarkable success. Our audience, panelists, and the Andy team on board, thank you all very much. As you may be aware, Andy, in partnership with MasterCard Inclusive Growth, is working to support digitalization of enterprise support organizations and the small and growing businesses they work with. Against this backdrop, we've planned a series of digitalization learning labs, as well as a matchmaking event where we aim to bring together ESOs and digitalization service providers to share and garner information that would help them make informed decisions about their digitalization needs. Our digitalization lab is ongoing, and we have another one scheduled for August 24, 2021, whilst the matchmaking event is tentatively scheduled for the fourth quarter of this year. Please watch out for our email with respect to this event, and once you get them, please do not forget to register. You can also get on our website and have more information. I want to give Rodrigo 1 minute to just emphasize a bit about the matchmaking event and share the survey. We are looking to invite more digital service vendors to join the matchmaking event because it's going to be open to our members across Africa. And so, Rodrigo, if you're there, if you can just in 1 minute share more about the matchmaking event before we officially close this conference for today.
Yes, thank you, Ajoke. This is Rodrigo Morales. I'm coordinating globally the digitalization project for our members. And just very quickly, INCAF postponed our matchmaking event for Africa, which was taking place today for October, for a broader scope, which will include the other 2 African Andy chapters. So for that purpose, we're looking for digital solution vendors like TDX. And there's in the chat box, there's a survey that we're sharing with anyone who can recommend us digital solution providers or vendors so they can apply for this event in October. This is part of the entire digitalization project, which includes the Learning Lab, which is, I think that the next session is coming soon in August for West Africa. And feel free to ask any questions on digitalization around Andy to my email address that I will be sharing right now. Thank you, Ajoke.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. So the conference continues tomorrow in English, and it promises to be equally enriching. For those who have registered for the conference, you'll receive an email with information about day 2 of the conference. Once again, I want to thank you all for joining us, and do enjoy the rest of the day. If you have any questions or inquiries or comments after this, you can email me or any member of the team. Thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.